Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Soon to be afternoon, a beautiful Oregon afternoon at that. It is a wonderful pleasure to welcome all of you upstairs here at the Salem Convention Center for today's Forum Speaker Series luncheon. And I momentarily will be introducing our president, Mr. Mike Herron, with VIPS Industries. But prior to that, we want to make sure our community is paying attention each and every day to two potential bond packages that you will be seeing potentially in May, as both groups have not yet made their definitive decisions. Chemeketa Community College intends to come forward with their bond proposal, this time again at zero new additional taxes for residents, but rather a carryover of the bond. If you would like more information, I would invite you to connect with a very special woman in this room today, and that is our own president, Jessica Howard. Jessica, would you please raise your hand? She is looking for helpers, and her sidekick, who will eagerly be by her side, is none other than our Dick with Nell. He is happy to also be taking your questions and would like to get you involved. The second is an operating levy being considered by the city of Salem, a livability levy. That will be one of the primary conversation pieces this evening at Salem City Council. Myself and Jameson Gideon on our professional staff team will of course be there, but be watching for these because you have the potential where we would have two money operating levy and livability levy on our May ballot. With that, it is a distinct pleasure to welcome up our chamber president, Mike Herron.
Thank you, Tom. It's good to see everybody's frozen faces but warm hearts at the Forum Chamber Lunch today, brought to you by our season-long sponsors, Hagen Hamilton Insurance Solutions, and this month our monthly sponsor, Key Bank. Would you please stand and join me for a moment of prayer reflection, followed by the national anthem performed today by Bryant Malone. We take this moment to pray and reflect, each in our way, on our lives and on this time. We are thankful for the meal before us, for the hands that prepared it, and for those who serve it. We are grateful for this day, for its blessings, its opportunities, and its challenges. May we lend each other strength and guidance. May we be driven to always give our best and have courage to meet the challenges we face. Amen. Brian.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Fantastic. Thank you, Brian. Brian is a financial consultant at WealthWave here in Salem. We're going to hear from each of our distinguished panelists in a moment, but I want to briefly introduce the head table today. Beginning with Director, all the way down here on my right, Director Andrew Stolfi with the Oregon Department of Consumer and Business Services, also Oregon's Insurance Commissioner. Next to him, Representative Ed Diehl from House District 17. Senator, well, is he here? Senator Golden? Okay, moments away will be Senator Jeff Golden from Senate District 13, or Senate District 3. Just came in the door. Thank you for joining us. To my immediate right, Senator Fred Girod from Senate District 9. And then we have Deputy Chief Claire McGrew, Department of Oregon State Fire Marshal, Fire Chief David Gerboth with the City of Salem, TJ Sullivan, Agent at Hagen Hamilton Insurance Solutions, and Ernesto Toscovich, Senior Vice President at Key Bank. So join me in welcoming our head table. In addition to the elected officials that we have seated with us up here, we've also got several in attendance that I want to recognize. Local elected officials, Betsy Earls with Chemeketa Board, Sarita Cross, Kaiser City Council, Shane Matthews, Salem City Council, Salem Mayor Julie Hoy, Diane Watson with the Chemeketa Board as well. Please welcome them as well. And I also want to recognize Chamber past presidents in attendance, Kathy Gordon, TJ Sullivan, Laura Dorn, Alan Rasmussen, and Brent DeHart, along with Salem Chamber Board members, Ted Ferry, Jeff Dunn, Dan McDowell, Alan Rasmussen, Ryan Dempster, Randy Sutton, Roger Hoy, and Angela Williams. I also want to give a special welcome to any of you who are new members to the Chamber, or if this is your first forum lunch. We're honored to have you with us today. So for the second season in a row, our partners at Hagen Hamilton Insurance Solutions serve as our forum speakers, our forum speaker series presenting sponsor. Please enjoy this brief video profile they have prepared.
Anytime you're in the insurance industry, you need to be innovative in how you solve problems. And we saw early on that insurance companies were trying to insure wineries as just average farms, and they're anything but. They have a whole different set of exposures. One agent named Gary Eastland, who's a longtime insurance agent, is kind of a legend in our industry. And Gary recognized that insurance companies did not have the right forms in place to properly protect wineries.
Gary Eastland, who was an agent here for years, helped Oregon Mutual write the forms that cover wineries and vineyards. And so Hagen Hamilton has been at the forefront of that from the beginning, from the wine boom in the Willamette Valley. Not only that, but Hagen Hamilton is the #1 agency as far as insuring wineries and vineyards. So I don't think you can really talk about insurance when it comes to wineries and vineyards in our area without Hagen Hamilton being part of that conversation. We have really tailored our program and our company and what we stand for to serve that industry, and we're proud of that. Insuring the wine industry can be a challenge. They have a really high value stock, which causes problems when you're talking about capacity for different insurance carriers. And insurance carriers are really restricting their capacity or how much that they're willing to insure at any one location. So you have wine storage facilities that everyone is sending wine to, and they're not able to meet the needs of our booming wine industry here. We have a product in Oregon Pinot that is world-renowned, and it's being produced in abundance. To be able to insure that volume with just a few companies willing to cover that risk is a problem. And Hagen Hamilton's able to combat that because carriers trust our knowledge in the industry. We've been pioneers for the wine industry for years. And so we are a trusted source of knowledge for these carriers. I love working with the wine industry. I grew up as part of that. I grew up on a farm in Dayton, and my dad in the off season would haul grapes from vineyards to wineries. So as a little girl, I would ride with him and go to visit all of these different locations, and now coming back as an adult to serve this industry has been really fun. Growing up, I was really close to the Wright family. I was their nanny and traveled the world with them. I went to Vietnam with them, and Ken was the officiant at my wedding. And so now I get to insure a winery that is getting worldwide accolades for their Pinot. And I feel like I was a part of that family for so long that it is rewarding to be able to serve them in a different capacity now. To be able to make their life easier and mitigate risk for them so that they can do their job to the best of their ability and not have to worry about the risks that may come with that is a great feeling. One of the really fun parts about insuring the wine industry here is how prolific and notable and recognized it is worldwide. So we work with wineries that are getting designations from Wine Spectator and being featured in news articles and having people from Europe and all over the world come to see them. And so we could go down the list of winery after winery that is on the forefront of their industry. But what I like about it is to just be surrounded by this culture of success and this culture of ingenuity and innovation. We're a leader in hazelnuts. We're a leader in grass seed. There are crops that need our climate and soil to thrive, and we've taken advantage of that. It's such a beautiful thing to see these industries prosper and become recognized for their hard work.
Thank you, Hagen Hamilton, for making me think about wine now at lunchtime on a Monday. But also, in all seriousness, thank you to the John family for your support, continued support, and thank you to the entire Hagen Hamilton team, Chris, and the team that are here today. We really appreciate your support at the Chamber. It's now my pleasure to introduce Ernesto Toscovich, Senior Vice President at KeyBank. Ernesto and the KeyBank team serve as today's Forum Luncheon monthly sponsor. 2025 represents a big milestone for KeyBank. They're celebrating 200 years in consumer and business banking. Ernesto is an industry and a local leader and is currently serving on the City of Salem's Budget Efficiencies Task Force. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the podium, Ernesto Toscovich.
Hello, hello. What a great day to do business in America. We are celebrating at KeyBank 200 years of our existence, and I'm really proud of that. I was thinking about our history. We started in New York before the electricity was present in the United States, before cars were around. We supported the railroad boom in 1800s, and then it came railroad crash in 1848, and we survived, thank God. And then Civil War came, and we worked through that. And then oil boom, and we financed companies during the Texas oil boom that fueled economic development in America. And then came Great Depression. And during the Great Depression, 9,000 banks failed. There were between 12 and 23 states that did not have any banks. And thank God we continued. And then First World War and Second World War, and we continued. Then 2008 came, and we continued financing enterprises. So I'm really proud of KeyBank. I feel fortunate that I work there, and we are planning to continue to support businesses for many years to come. And I'm very privileged. I thank Chamber of Commerce for giving us the opportunity to sponsor this event. It's very interesting, this topic of wildfires. Jameson and I just came back from Washington, D.C., and we visited our Congresswoman, Val Hoy, and I asked her a question. I didn't think about our events, but I told her, I grew up in former Yugoslavia, and my town lived off timber. We exported doors, furniture, windows, mostly to America, and we lived amazingly good. And forests were thinned every year, and we didn't have wildfires. Just didn't happen. So I asked her that question, and she had a very constructive response. But I found it interesting, what a coincidence. So we are pushing for timber industry. Hopefully it will work out. And As we know, in recent years, we had tragic Santiam Canyon fires about 5 years ago. Over 16,000 acres of state forests were damaged. The fires took extensive toll on local residents, recreation sites, and natural resources. Massive fires that consumed Los Angeles in January, all Oregonians wish to better understand Oregon pathway towards safety and resiliency. To start today's program dialogue, we turn the microphone over to our moderator, Representative Ed Diehl.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I get the honor of moderating a discussion with Senator Girod and Senator Golden on this issue that has impacted almost everybody in the state. As you know, we've had unprecedented wildfires in the last few years, impacting in particular a lot of rural homeowners. People have been losing their insurance. There's a lot of questions and frustration about wildfire maps that don't appear to accurately represent the fire risk for these homeowners. There's been delays in federal funding that was promised to get these folks whole, long drawn-out lawsuits with utility companies and the homeowners. There's lots of questions about are we doing what we can to actively manage the forest to mitigate wildfire risk and generate revenue for the state. But I want to start with a question, which is we faced unprecedented costs last year related to wildfires. We were called into a special session to pay the bills that the state was obligated to pay. So and it looks like we're going to be stuck paying some expensive bills in the near term. So my question is to both the senators is, how do we do that? What are your suggestions? I know Senator Golden has made a proposal, but yeah, let's start with you, Senator Golden.
Representative Diehl, thank you very much for the invitation today. And I just, for a moment, have to thank my colleague, Senator Girod, who for 2 sessions has been my vice chair on Senate Natural Resources and Wildfire. And we have a different perspective often on natural resources, but have developed a relationship I really appreciate. Rep. Diehl, you asked the $300 million question.
I thought I'd start right off with
$300 million is a rough estimate of what we need, just bare bones in total for every biennium for everything wildfire. And when we look at the costs of suppression this last year, mostly Eastern Oregon fires, it was so large that you can question if that's enough money, if that large number is enough money. So what has become very clear is that the general fund, which has primarily supported wildfire up until now, an investment of $200 million in our broad bill that we passed in 2021, Senate Bill 762, the general fund can't carry that anymore. It is subject to so many very serious pressures that the governor impaneled 35 people last summer to come up with recommendations about another source of funding, reliable source or sources of funding for wildfire. Senator Girod and I were 2 of 4 legislators who were ex officio on that group, and some recommendations have come forward. There's no source that would provide the whole $300 million. It's going to have to be a combination of sources. And we are charged, we 4 legislators, with trying to consolidate this sort of difficult and not very specific recommendation into a bill that will start in the House because it's a revenue measure and has to start in the House. And it will be a lively, spicy conversation because there are a number of people who are not sure they're ready to pay anymore in order for us to support wildfire. I don't see an alternative. If there's one thing I think I'd like to say, it's that the idea that we can confront wildfire and keep the state relatively safe without asking more of all Oregonians seems like a fiction to me. And it's a matter of finding the fairest, most effective, least burdensome way to do it. I could go on, Representative, but why don't I let my colleague have a crack?
Oh, thank you very much. And it is a privilege to be here. And Salem's always been a second home to me, primarily because of someone that you lost not too long ago. I was very good friends with Peter Courtney, and I truly miss him. But to answer the question, where does the money come from? Now, if you got a budget and you had a 20% increase, would you say that that's a pretty nice increase? That's how much we're going to get as an increase to the general fund. The general fund is going to be $39 billion with a B for the state of Oregon. It's up tremendously. There are ways to fix that problem. One is the rainy day fund, which isn't something that we can spend, but it's $150 million that was in the governor's budget to make sure that we can pay our staff to go out and fight fires. So that's $150 million right off the top to go in there. Now, we do need $300 million a year. There are two things that are dedicated. One is what's called a retaliatory tax dedication, which is between $140 and $160 million. The insurance agent, the insurance companies like this because there's a nexus between fire and insurance costs, and even the healthcare part of insurance likes it because of the particulate matter that's in the air. The other would be a lottery dedication, of which would be, if we did 10%, would be $200 million. That would require a vote of the people, and I'm pretty sure that you're going to see that on the ballot. Again, none of that would come out of your pocket. Now, the solution that my good friend to the right wants to see is to keep the kicker. The kicker is $1.8 billion, and that's, if you do the math, there's roughly 4 million people in the state of Oregon. It's $450 for every man, woman, and child. That doesn't include people that aren't filing tax returns. It doesn't stand a chance in hell of passing at the ballot box, and is going to require 2 Republicans in the Senate and 4 in the House. I just don't see that as a possibility. Further, the last thing I'd like to say is we need an aerial attack, and we need to hit these fires early, and I'm sorry to take so much time here, but this issue is extremely important to me. We need 5 what they call Firehawk helicopters, which are Black Hawk helicopters that are modified. Now, you'd say, and plus we need hangars. That would run about $150 million. That does not come out of the general fund. That comes under GO bonding, of which we have $2.2 billion to line up and spend. So it's a question of priorities. Are we going to spend billions of dollars on 10,000 homeless people in Portland, or are we going to spend money on putting out forest fires? And for you that don't know, I am very lucky to be at this table. I'm lucky to be alive. My wife and I had to run out of the Santiam Canyon fire, and that's the reason I came back, is to deal with this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you both. Building on that, I had an email from someone. I don't know if she's my constituent, but she's an Oregon resident. She's 80 years old, and she's telling us that the wildfire codes, these new codes, require her to cut down 50% of the trees on her land. She has 1,000 trees. So the crowns don't come within 10 feet of each other. For the last month, she's raked up 67 barrels of pine needles before she gets fined. And to trim her costs, the trees will cost over $100,000 to her. But she's asking a pretty simple question, I think, is the state seems to be acknowledging that active forest management plays a role, and I'd add grassland management plays a role in wildfire mitigation. So she's asking, why doesn't the state go first and trim the state forest trees and rake the leaves and mitigate the forest there? Because I agree with this lady. It doesn't feel like the state is taking the lead on that issue. So I'd ask both of you, maybe Senator Girod can answer this question.
Well, that's kind of a tough question to answer, because I know that the people that lost their homes up in the canyon, we were supposed to eliminate red tape, and we've put more and more red tape on them in order to build, and I just don't think that's right. I think some of that might be a little bit of an exaggeration. I'm sure my friend to my right will say that a good share of that is. We do know that if you build with certain materials, that really helps. But I do think that should be an option. I know in my house, we had trees all around us. I like that because that's the reason I lived out in the country. So I'd like to keep all options open, but I'll just leave it at that.
I see a little more than 6 minutes left. Don't know how we're possibly going to do this justice, but I do want to put a bookmark into a further discussion about wildfire funding and give the kicker idea what it deserves, but we'll leave that for another day. A couple of things here. One is part of the challenge has been what I have to call massive disinformation or incorrect information circulating about what this wildfire bill does and what it the codes and standards it asks for in the highest hazard places. I don't believe your correspondent, Rep. Diehl, is accurate. There are some very good resources that show kind of concentric circles around homes, very strict in the 0 to 5 foot area. There's a 5 to, I think, 30 foot area that relates to what the woman described. And then it can turn into forest again, basically. But we have people really fearful that if they're in a high hazard zone, we're going to make them turn their land into a moonscape. And it's just, if you see what is being proposed, it's very, very different from that. As far as management of public lands, that's a very valid issue. And our omnibus wildfire bill addresses that. There are 3 parts to the bill. One is fire adapted communities, which has caused the concerns you're talking about. One is safe and effective suppression, and one is resilient forests. Think of forest thinning. And in the first biennium of 762, we spent $20 million on just that. And of course, there's a federal forest question as well. They've been investing a lot of money in forest resiliency, but we don't really see it. And I think that's a problem. It's really a problem when we're asking people to do some things on their own property. We're trying very hard to coordinate more with the feds. But I think the last point I'd make is we have a both and challenge here. People say, don't worry about yards or a property around the WUI or in city limits. It's all the public lands and they all start there and burn into our communities. That's not accurate. Some do and some don't. But it is a both and. We have to take this challenge on several fronts, including how we collectively keep our landscapes and including the public lands and more.
Thank you both. So on the wildfire maps, you mentioned there is a lot of confusion. I think down in Southern Oregon, there were hundreds of people, community members that have gathered recently to express their frustration. We're approaching an appeal deadline for a lot of these homeowners. I think it's the end of March. Do you think it's appropriate to extend that deadline to the end of June for the appeal process?
I really want to talk about this. In my part of the state especially, it's a very real problem. The people who, I've walked a lot of properties at the request of their landowners, and the fact is in many cases, you're looking at what looks like very low hazard property that's been classified as high hazard. And the frustration has been that there's nothing people can do, good work to reduce their risk that factors into the equation. So I am pushing with others for a significant change where that hazard designation would not apply to individual properties. And the reason for that is that the model, and I'm not going to go in the weeds on this, the model that spit out those designations are based on large landscape factors that really matter. You can't tell the hazard of a property merely by walking across it, but it allows zero consideration of the specific characteristics of that property. And asking people to accept that is asking them not to believe the evidence of their eyes when they walk their property. And that's just too much to ask of people. And we are in the process of a major conversation about how to change that part of the bill, because the plain fact is we will fail if we don't have the cooperation and collaboration of Oregonians generally, because this problem is way too big for government alone to address. Again,
I think that it's really important that we look at all avenues in what we can do to alleviate wildfire. One is we have to adequately fund it. Two, we have to have an adequate aerial attack to put the fires out. I think we're going down the wrong road when we start dictating what's going to be in your house and how far the safety area has to be around your house. And there is some confusion as to how far that goes, and I would agree with my good friend to the right that confusion has led to a lot of hostility. Having said that, I really resent the fact that when I lost our home, being told what I could do and what I couldn't do with that house. It's extremely frustrating. We have a bill in the committee that we sit in where if you lose your home and you're on EFU property, you can only, no matter how big the home was, you can only rebuild it to 2,500 square feet. Sorry, I'm going to be opposed to stuff like that. It's just, look at the town of Gates, the little town of Gates. They have faced one obstacle after the next. And the earliest that most of those people can get building permits will be in the year 27, and that is if it goes the way that it's supposed to go. So 7 years after the fire to get a bloody building permit. And that's just plain wrong. And so I really kind of resent putting all this extended land use on rural areas. I just think it's dead wrong. Thank you.
And we have 9 seconds left.
I planned it that way.
Yeah.
Can we get a rain check to talk in a little more depth? Because I'm sort of popping out of my seat here a little bit.
I bet you are. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you both for joining, and thanks for the opportunity to talk about this important subject. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I'm much shorter than this as well. My name is Claire McGrew. I serve as Chief Deputy for the Department of State Fire Marshal. Thank you so much for the opportunity to join you all here today for a lunchtime activity. Wildfire is certainly something that has grown in scope for conversations that we've had at the State Fire Marshal's office, as well as things that we've been trying to figure out how do we best address those for Oregon. As they've expanded in scope and scale, I think there's a couple of numbers that are important to us as well. There's roughly 300 fire agencies, structural fire agencies in the state of Oregon, and anywhere between 10 to 12 structural firefighters as well. Their roles have been changing in the state as we've seen this wildfire crisis continue to evolve. Those fire agencies also report to us their fire incident calls. We get about 17,000 fire incident calls reported to us each year, and roughly a third of those are structure fires. We're talking house fires, barn fires, those types of things. We're also seeing an alarming increase as well in outdoor fires as well. So anything from discarded smoking materials, chains dragging down highways, certainly some open debris burning. So anything really that's outside of a structure, again, we're continuing to see an increase in those areas as well. Certainly something that we have some opportunities to prevent and be aware of. This trend also, as it's going up over time, we certainly have seen some increased alarm as well when we saw what happened to us with the 2020 wildfires. That certainly Labor Day wildfires, we saw multiple conflagrations on the scene, and we required additional suppression response activities. And certainly, I apologize, there's a lot of heart and soul that went into those weeks, and it certainly is still touching to those of us that were there during those activities. So overall, fire seasons are expanding. There does remain a need for Oregonians to remain vigilant about what it is that they're doing and what they're involved in. And we want to make sure that we can provide a lot of education around that. On the heels of the 2020 wildfires, we also saw some legislation. 2021 saw some Senate Bill 762 legislation, which brought about the Community Wildfire Risk Reduction Program. Some of the things that were also previously mentioned here as well with the Defensible Space Code, as well as some responsibilities for us to help educate Oregonians on what they could do on their specific parcel on land to improve their risk for themselves and for their community. This community wildfire risk reduction program is through Fire Adapted Oregon. I think it's really exciting because it really gives us an opportunity to help individual Oregonians figure out how they can best help in the spaces and the places that they can really make an impact. We have 7 regional risk reduction specialists that are out and about throughout the state. Their role really is to provide local solutions, help to connect with local fire agencies, local cities, planners, homeowners associations, and in some cases, members of the public, to help them understand what they can do in order to change their risk, change their hazard, and change their ability to actually reduce their risk for themselves and for their community. We also, as part of that Community Wildfire Risk Reduction Program, we have a Defensible Space Program. Again, I mentioned Senate Bill 762. As part of that legislation, we had the responsibility to roll out the Defensible Space Code. With that, the code is in draft format, and there is a copy that's available on our website, and you can use the QR code at the bottom of the screen, and that will take you there, and you'll be able to take a look at what that looks like. It's very restrictive, very limited in nature, and really has some very small span of scope, and again, it does remain in a draft format. And there's a couple of things I want to mention there. We've not put that code into play just yet. I would anticipate that at the end of 2025, that code will remain active, and I always get a lot of questions about what does that mean for enforcement. The code applies to areas of high risk and the WUI. On the Oregon Wildfire Hazard Map that was published by OSU and Oregon Department of Forestry. It does not, from what I've seen in the hazard map so far, it does not include any areas of the Salem area. However, there is a lot across the state that we are continuing to do some education on what those pieces look like. There is the Defensible Space Code. We use that again as an educational tool right now. We have an assessment, so if there is a homeowner, landowner that is interested in us coming out to help to take a look at what systems improvement can be done in order to prepare for the wildfire code, or else in order just to know what steps they can take in order to be more prepared for wildfire and help reduce their risk to their home, for their family. We certainly are willing to do that as well. We've partnered with fire agencies all across the state in order to do some of those assessments as well. Just as a quick note on that, as we had this mentioned as well, this really is within 50 feet of the built environment, 50 feet within your primary structure is really what we're looking at. And we're looking at spacing of about 10 feet. So we're trying to keep trees off the roofs about 10 feet, trying to make sure that trees are limbed up and brushes cleared up off the ground. Really the principles with that is we're trying to make sure that there is not an opportunity for fire to spread across the ground, up to trees, and then over to the structure as well. So that's really grounding principles with that. I also just want to mention a strong part of what we do as well is working with fire agencies across the state for the Oregon Fire Mutual Aid System. So Oregon State Fire Marshal's Office does not have any firefighters that work for us, but we do partner with those fire agencies. We use this system in order to mobilize resources across the state. So every incident starts locally and ends locally, and really what the bullseye shows you is how things expand and contract depending on how the incident is going. So for that, I bring this up as well because we recently had a deployment through emergency mutual aid agreements through California. California have been strong partners for us. They've really come into our state to help us when our firefighters are tired and exhausted and we've needed to help put systems back together, and they've been an incredible asset for us. So it's a true honor for us to assist California when they needed it. For this California EMAC, we did see 21 Oregon strike teams that mobilized relatively quickly, 15 right off the gate. So we were able to send those directly down there, and then we had 6 additional strike teams that were sent with water tenders. to assist them with their specific needs that they needed down there at the Palisades fire. 370 Oregon firefighters from, what did I have on here? I think it was 23 counties. Absolutely amazing. And so I think just a really huge shout out to the Oregon Fire Service as well, who were able to put these task forces, these resources, these strike teams together so quickly. They work really well together, and they were able to get down there and assist those California incident management teams with the work that they needed to be done. 96 local fire agencies. I bring that up as well as I started this. I talked about 300 fire agencies in Oregon. 96 of those agencies were able to provide firefighters to actually mobilize out of state. So a huge, tremendous opportunity for us to also provide some suppression resources out there as well. I'll be around at the end as well in case there are questions, but with that, I'll pass to the next speaker.
All right, well, good afternoon. Dave Gerboth, Fire Chief for the City of Salem, and I want to thank you for having me here today and certainly for this important topic. As we look at the City of Salem, and we're focused on our local preparedness and our local resiliency. And there's really three areas that we're focusing on for wildland fire within this city and with this region. And first is our collaboration, our cooperation with our neighboring agencies. So we know that we can't do it alone, nobody can. And what is the most effective and efficient way for us to get resources at the time when we really need them? So certainly we participate in the CONFLAG program within the Oregon State Fire Marshal, that mutual aid system, which is critical. However, locally, we want to make sure that we're getting those fires to the point that we suppress them before we have to access that system, and we can keep them small. What we're doing, certainly we have mutual aid where we can request our partners, but going beyond that is we're looking at what we call automatic aid, where we're just dispatching the closest resources at the time, regardless of what agency that is. And I don't think anybody in the community really cares on what the patch is on the side of the fire engine, as long as they're showing up well-equipped, well-prepared, and in a timely fashion to actually address that emergency. I can say within Kaiser, Marion County, and Salem, we're actually working toward turning that on July 1st so that we'll have automatic aid and it'll just be closest resource. If you're in the city of Salem, you may see a Marion County engine come to provide you service and vice versa, but it's the best way for us as a region to utilize our resources efficiently to support all of our neighborhoods. And that goes with law enforcement as well. They have a critical role in the evacuation process, and so we're certainly working with them moving forward. The second is education and preparedness of our community. And so we also have a community risk reduction division that we are focusing on wildland fire education with our community and preparedness for our community. They understand what that is. Evacuations, understanding fuel treatments, the differences of fire resistant construction and home hardening, knowing that most of these dramatic images that we see of fires coming through neighborhoods, it is actually not the fire front that is actually destroying homes. What it is oftentimes is ember cast. There are ways that we can prevent that. Oftentimes it is either no money or not very expensive. Ways that we can box eaves, take combustible materials away from homes, and certainly providing that education is critically important. You will see that intensify in the city of Salem as we move closer to wildland season this year. And then third is really providing the resources that are necessary that we have to actually suppress these incidents. So that's appropriate staffing, appropriate equipment, and appropriate training. Within the city of Salem, the city passed the 2022 Safety and Livability Bond. With that, we are recapitalizing our fleet, and in that we have also added 2 additional engines, fire engines that are specifically designed for wildland fire. So we're looking at how we adapt our operations to make sure that we're looking at this really growing threat to the community. With that, we're also increasing our training, both for firefighters and dispatchers, to ensure that we're responding to these in the best way. And I think it's really important, I know it's been mentioned, 2024 was a historic year in Oregon. More acres burned than ever before. So that should be a wake-up call. When we look at Los Angeles, we had Salem firefighters on the front line in Los Angeles making a difference, bringing that experience back here. But in Oregon in 2020, I know obviously we had the fires in the canyon, but at the same time in an urbanized area of Oregon where you had the Alameda fire that went through the urbanized areas of Ashland, Talent, Medford, and Phoenix, 2,600 homes were destroyed. It has happened in Oregon. It can happen in Oregon, and we're doing everything we can to prevent that here. Thank you so much.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Andrew Stolfi, the Oregon Insurance Commissioner. Glad to be with you today. Really appreciate the invitation from the Chamber. I've got probably way too much stuff to talk about in the time that I have, so I'm going to try to go quick, and I will be here afterwards as well in case anyone has some questions. But what I wanted to do is give a bit of an overview about the state of the home insurance market, especially how wildfire is impacting that, and hope you can walk away with two things. One is a little bit of data about what we have been seeing. The senators talked earlier about some of the misunderstandings about things that are going on in our market. So I wanted to share some data that we're seeing, and also just a bit of knowledge about how insurance companies make their decisions and why are premiums going up, so that you can understand that a bit more and share that with folks in your community. So I'm going to start with a question. So what is insurance? When you think of it, you might start singing a catchy jingle, right? You might think of Flo or an emu or something else. And there's a reason for that, right? Insurance companies do a great job advertising, so much so that people often think of insurance like a commodity, like cattle, oil, or gold, and focus solely on the cost. So how much will this thing cost me? And not focus on a lot of other things. And I can assure you that only focusing on the price of an insurance policy is the wrong way to shop for an insurance policy. So what really is insurance, right? It's something we all need, right? You can't drive a car without an auto policy. No lender will give you a mortgage unless you have a homeowner's policy. It's also something that most of us want for protection purposes, whether for ourselves or for loved ones in the form of health or life insurance. So insurance looks like a lot of different things because it covers or responds to a lot of different circumstances, but it's at its very core, every single insurance policy, you talk about auto, home, life, health, disability, or pet insurance even, it's all about one thing. It's about transferring risk from one party, you, to another, the insurance company. Right? A health policy transfers the risk of having to pay to fix your arm if you get a broken arm. Homeowner's policy transfers the risk of having to pay to rebuild your house after a fire. Life insurance policy transfers the risk of your family losing an income stream. And all of these things do that in exchange for a premium that an insurance company calculates based on two things. Oversimplifying this a little, but keep this in mind. One is the likelihood that you're going to file a claim. And the second is, how much will that claim cost me? So it's that core role as a risk transfer mechanism that's really crucial to keep in mind when you're thinking about how insurance companies operate and how the insurance market responds to anything up to and including climate change. It's also critical to keep in mind that predicting whether someone will file a claim and how much that claim will cost, it's part art and part science. It's getting more complicated now that machine learning and artificial intelligence are being used by companies, but in every instance, that insurance company needs to support its decision by data, or we as the regulator will not allow it. And when we look at the data around losses, especially around large natural catastrophe losses, and we think about what that means for the likelihood of many claims to be filed and a lot of money to be lost, the data is pretty overwhelmingly awful. And I've got a couple slides just to illustrate this. So this one right here, and don't worry about reading what any of that means, but so this shows the number of billion-dollar disasters in the US over the last 44 years, broken down by the month in which they occur. Like I said, don't worry about reading it, but look at the trends. You note that there's a thick black line. That's the average annual number of billion-dollar disasters. We're now at 9 as an average. All the colored lines that are above that, those are all from the past decade. The top 2 of them, they read 27 and 28 billion-dollar disasters a year. Those are just the last 2 years. So in fact, 2024, that's the purple line, marks the 10th consecutive year in which 10 or more separate billion-dollar disaster events have impacted the US. So this graph, this is another way to look at kind of the same information, those same numbers from the past 40 so years, just broken down by the types of disaster per year. Again, notice that upward trend. And if you probably can't read it, but the cost per year, the last 2 years, that top line is about $600 million each year. So the last 2 slides are all natural disasters. You know, in Oregon, we worry mostly about wildfires. So this slide, and it's a couple years old, but it shows how economic and insured losses from wildfire have increased significantly over the last decade across the US. According to the National Interagency Fire Center data, of the 10 years with the largest acres burned, all have occurred since 2004. There's some NOAA research showing that between 1980 and 2021, the US had 20 wildfire events that caused more than $1 billion in damage, and 16 of those have been since 2020. And this isn't just a US issue, and I'll come back to why that's important in a minute. You might remember the Australian wildfires that the COVID pandemic quickly overshadowed. But between 2018 and 2022, we saw global wildfire losses of $69 billion, with insurers paying out almost $40 billion. In the US, the Camp Fire in 2018 was the largest during this time. It alone had $16.5 billion in economic losses. So what about Oregon? Some of you might have seen this slide before if you've heard me talk about this. So this shows just how dramatic the increase in natural disaster losses, insured losses, have been in Oregon. So what it shows are insured losses per decade, and you can see starting in the 80s, the 90s, 2000s, 2010s, total insured natural disaster losses, cat losses, well below. That first line is 0.05, it's $500 million. And then you can see the 2020s, right? You have wildfire insured losses close to $3 billion, winter storm insured losses of about $1 billion, and wind and thunderstorm losses, maybe around 200,000 or so. So that's about 4 times the last 40 years combined, just in the first part of our decade. I mentioned earlier, right, insurance is about transferring risk, and insurers make their decisions on the likelihood of someone filing a claim and how much that claim will cost. So this data, this is Oregon data, and it shows how real life experience contributes to those decisions an insurance company is making. So it's not a surprise that these large wildfire losses have influenced insurers' decision making. And want to take a step back just a minute. You know, I'm talking a lot about natural disasters and how those have contributed. If we, all of us here and everyone across the country, we've all been seeing probably double-digit premium increases. You think about your auto and your home policy. This is an issue across the country. You can live in a rural area in the middle of a city, Oregon, Wyoming, Illinois, New York, Maine, Florida. It doesn't matter. Everyone is seeing double-digit increases before you even really worry about, do you live in a high-risk area? And there's 3 things really driving that. One are these large billion-dollar-plus disasters and how much those have been increasing that I talked about. The second is kind of related to that, and it's around reinsurance. So reinsurance is insurance for insurance companies. Every single insurance company has this. They can't really operate without it. What it does is it shields them from very large losses. Reinsurance companies, they're insurance companies, but they're more like investment companies. So they most of them are global companies, and they deploy billions of dollars. They have investors who contribute, and they deploy billions of dollars to try to get a return on their money, as any company does. And those reinsurance companies, because of the scale of all those costly disasters, have been suffering huge losses over the last 10 plus years. So it's done 2 things. One, it's caused those investors who contribute to the reinsurance companies to say, well, maybe my money might be better served being somewhere else. So it's reduced the amount of capital that reinsurance companies have. And it's also just increased the cost of reinsurance. We've heard from companies that they're paying twice as much for half as much coverage. And that to an insurance company, that reinsurance, again, essential. It's a cost of doing business for them, and that then gets passed on to policyholders in higher premiums. And the third thing, shouldn't be a surprise, inflation, right? We've seen what's happened to the cost of goods over the last couple of years. Most homeowner policies are replacement cost policies. So if you have a kitchen fire, your insurance company will give you the money you need to replace what's been lost or damaged. Well, the cost of a kitchen fire is significantly more now than it was a few years ago. I mean, we're not even talking about total losses because there aren't that many total losses here, but even little losses cost a lot more for insurance companies. So all of those things together have resulted in much higher prices for everyone before you even start thinking about whether you live in a high risk area and what that means. Some data, I've only got a couple minutes left, but we do collect data from insurance companies on premiums and policies issued. I can give a couple highlights of that data. Some caveats, right? So it's only for companies who have more than $50,000 in premium, so it's not every company. It's also only statewide. We just did some data collection to get zip code level data, which will help us see, all right, what's going on around Bend or Redmond or Medford. Don't have the results yet. So the data gets a little muddled. And it's also for every type of homeowners policy. And there's a few, I won't bore you with what they are, but it includes renters as well. So when we're talking about averages, that'll, again, kind of muddle the averages a little bit. But just some quick highlights you can see up on the screen. First, we have a competitive insurance market. We've got more than 100 companies offering coverage. We have not seen companies leaving Oregon because of wildfire risk, like you've probably read about in California. We have seen an overall increase in the total number of policies being offered in the state. If we compare 2018, before our wildfire situation, to 2023, we've got almost a 10% increase in the total number of policies, and only a relatively small increase over that same time period in the number of FAIR Plan policies. The FAIR Plan's an insurer of last resort, so if you can't get a policy through any one of the insurers whose commercials you see on TV, you can go to the FAIR Plan. And pre-2020 and back in 2018, there were 1,500 policies statewide. Now there's 2,300. That's about 0.1% of our market. California has 450,000 plus policies, about 3% of their market. Premiums, right, is what everyone cares about, of course, as we should. They've gone up about 52% since 2018 to an average of around $886 from $500 and something. Don't have a 2023 comparison yet, but as of 2022, that amount, that $886, was among the lowest of any similar states like us, and the amount of increase that we had was also less than a lot of those other states. And the last thing I'll mention around data, non-renewals. So we've probably read or seen stories about people losing their insurance, being canceled because of wildfire risk particularly. That's technically a non-renewal where the company says, we're just not gonna renew your policy. Those have gone up about 11% statewide from 2018 to 2023. But we're still seeing it's only about 0.78% of all policies in the state. And there's about 1.6 million policies total get non-renewed. But the overall number of policies has gone up. I'll leave you with this, that there's a lot of things people can do. Happy to talk more about it. I really just want to stress that last one right there, to contact us with questions. I'll leave it on this slide. This is our contact information. We have a whole team of consumer advocates that do nothing but answer questions, take complaints, provide assistance. They love doing what they're doing. And if anyone reaches out to us, we can provide them that assistance as well. So with that, happy to answer questions later. Thanks.
Sorry for the delay. We're now going to open the table up for, or open the floor for questions. There are some microphones circulating around, so please raise your hand if you've got a question for one of our panelists here.
Question for two senators. We continue talking about fighting wildfires and insurance cost. How about removing some of the fuel, thinning out the forest?
I couldn't agree more. I absolutely couldn't agree more. For a long, long time up the canyon, we have said that if you keep adding fuel, that you're going to have a catastrophic fire. And if you look at the Capitol, the man that's all gold, he has an axe in his hand. The state did particularly well, especially in education, when we were allowed to cut trees and reduce the fuel load. So I couldn't agree more with your statement. Thank you for the question.
What he said. We could keep going on. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. We need to actively manage our forest.
I have a question for Director Stolfi. Can you talk a little bit more about how Oregon is in a different situation than California? Thank you.
Yes, we could talk for an hour about that, but there's two general ways. One is just practically, and then there's some regulatory differences. Practically, we've heard folks, we had record acres lost last year, 1.9 plus million acres. I think 42 structures lost. And that's about what we see if we take out 2020 and 2021 and the huge number of losses we had there. Over a 10-year period, California averages 1.2 million acres burned a year, and I think around 5,600 homes lost. And that is what impacts the insurance market there. That's what impacts insurers' decisions. So what we need to keep doing is keep controlling and reducing risk so that we don't suffer losses of structures and losses of lives to keep the market down. There's also some regulatory differences, which I won't bore you with, but public measures in California have really restricted what insurers there can do, what they can take account of when they're building their rates and making decisions. And that's resulted in insurers not seeing that market as very friendly and making it much easier for them to leave the market when there's big losses. Thanks.
Just to build on Ernesto's comment there too, I know Senator Golden mentioned forest thinning as one of the tripod aspects of getting additional resilience in our forests. As a timber industry representative, all we've seen over the last 2 years is reduction of timber supply, especially under the Habitat Conservation Plan, which reduced state harvest by about 32%. This year, we have an interesting opportunity with the review of the Northwest Forest Plan that we haven't seen for about 30 years. How are you, as legislators in Oregon, going to help advocate for the responsible management of our forests under this new plan?
Well, that's a tough one because I'm in the minority, and I think everyone here that knows when you're in the minority, you can do a lot of talking, but you have to have people that are going to listen. And for a long, long time, and I think everyone pretty much knows that I am extremely pro-timber because of the district that I represent. It's important that we do not lose any more land so that the timber companies can go in there and harvest timber and get the fuel load down. And thinning isn't always the answer. On the west side with fir trees, that doesn't work so well. On the east side, where you have ponderosa pine, that works fine. But I have and I will always be extremely pro-timber, and I've done everything that I can think of to be that way. But if you sit and watch these committees, you know that they're stacked so that the Republicans are in the minority, and I have lost I don't know how many votes on a party line vote concerning that matter.
I'll add, I'm more optimistic now with the change at the federal level, with the new administration and the new leadership, that hopefully they will find a sympathetic ear to what's going on in Oregon. Our problem is that almost half of our state isn't owned by Oregon. It's owned by people who are not here. People who, it's federal land. And they've never walked in our forest, they don't live here, they don't know us, but yet their representatives are making decisions about how our land is managed. So I hope that at the federal level, there is some more sympathy for what's going on, and so we're talking to legislators. I'm encouraging, modernizing the Endangered Species Act to look at that and make it more practical. I mean, we have a Forest Service that's on a path to spend over $1 billion to kill 450,000 barred owls to save the spotted owl. Actually, the plan doesn't save it, it just slows its demise. Those kinds of decisions are driven by laws and policies at the federal level that just don't make sense anymore. They need to be revisited.
Great, thank you. Let's give our panelists a warm thank you again for taking the time for this. I quickly want to thank Brian Malone for singing the national anthem. You did a fantastic job. Again, Brian's with WealthWave. Thank you to KeyBank. Yeah, certainly gets another round of applause. Thank you to KeyBank for sponsoring us this month, and thank you again to Chris and the team at Hagen Hamilton for your ongoing support of the Forum Speaker Series. There's several upcoming chamber events I want to highlight before you leave here today. All of these can be found on salemchamber.org. And the first is Salem Chamber Businesswomen, which meets next Tuesday, February 18th at Roth's West Salem. The speaker will be Amanda Jacob of Life Changes by You, presenting mindful spending and empowered thinking. Make special note, there is no forum lunch for March. That's works for me, I don't have to speak. But we will reconvene Monday, April 14th to meet candidates. This is a big one. You don't want to miss this one. To meet the candidates running for the Salem-Keizer School Board, as well as the candidates that will be running to fill Mayor Julie Hoy's vacated seat in Ward 6 on Salem City Council. So that is going to be a really key moment for us to hear from our future and potential leaders in our community in those key roles. Tickets are going fast for Salem's premier evening out, the 74th Annual First Citizens Awards Banquet, which will be held Saturday, March 8th, upstairs, right here in the Willamette Ballroom. We'll recognize 4 remarkable community leaders, including Salem's First Citizen, the Distinguished Service Award winners, and an outstanding young professional. Gentlemen, you still have time to get a few inches taken out on your tuxedo. Let's get ready for that evening, courtesy of our presenting sponsors, Pioneer Trust Bank and Mountain West Center for Community Excellence. And finally, we're going to close today with the gifting of our flower centerpiece giveaway provided by our partners at Roth's Fresh Markets. And today the winner is a fellow graduate of mine, Leadership Salem, Jenny Moore with Spirit Mountain Casino. Thank you all for coming, and I'll see you again on April 14th.